All right, you've got spies, generals, revolutionaries, all locked in this incredibly high-stakes game. We're just surviving another day as a victory.
And if you want to know just how grim things were, this quote from one of the top commanders, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, says it all. This wasn't a war with rules or sentiment. It was an absolute fight to the death. And if you fell, that was it.
So you might be asking, how on earth did it get this bad? Well, to really get a handle on our spy story, we first have to understand the massive conflict that was literally tearing this entire colony in two.
The slave revolt kicks things off in 91, and by 94, slavery is abolished, and a guy named Toussaint Louverture rises to the top. But the real flashpoint happens in 98. Toussaint kicks out this French agent Haiteville, who as a final act of pure spite appoints Toussaint's rival André Rigaud as a co-commander. He basically lit the fuse on an all-out civil war on his way out the door.
And you gotta understand, this wasn't just two men fighting for power. This was a battle for the soul of the nation. Toussaint envisioned one single unified colony, but Rigaud, he wanted to break off the South and rule it as his own separate territory. These were two visions that simply could not exist at the same time.
All right, with that background, let's zoom in on the heart of our story. We're heading to the port city of Jacmel in December 1799. The general in charge there is in a really desperate situation, and things are about to get a whole lot stranger thanks to a very unexpected guest.
Meet General Alexandre Pétion. He's one of Rigaud's best commanders, but right now, he is in an absolutely impossible spot. I mean, he's surrounded by land, outnumbered almost 2-to-1 by Dessalines' army. He's blockaded by sea. His men are starving, they're running out of ammo, all his supply lines are gone. Defeat looks pretty much guaranteed.
And check this out. The ship that's cutting off his only escape route, it's American. See, the U.S. had picked a side, and they sided with Toussaint to protect their trade deals. So you've got the American Navy actively helping to starve Pétion's army. For Pétion, looking out at that harbor, that ship was basically a giant ticking clock counting down to his own destruction.
But then, just when it looks like it's all over, a little bit of what seems like luck. Pétion's men grab an American sailor they find in a local brothel. But here's the twist. This is not just some random sailor. His name is Michael McCoy, and his being in Jacmel is no accident at all.
Because, you guessed it, Michael McCoy is a spy. He's only 19, but he's on a mission from the U.S. State Department to figure out how strong Rigaud's forces really are. His job was to gather intel. But now, by getting caught, he's just handed the guy he was spying on, General Pétion, a very unique and very dangerous opportunity.
Now, Pétion is a smart cookie. He was trained in France, and he figures out pretty quickly that this supposed sailor is way more than he seems. So he doesn't see a prisoner, he sees a weapon. A tool that could turn this whole situation around, and he decides to play a very high-stakes game of deception.
And this is just brilliant. Pétion doesn't just accuse McCoy. He plays it cool. He flatters the kid, hinting that he knows he's an important diplomat. Then he dangles this irresistible offer. I'll give you information that will make your career, stuff that will blow your bosses away. All I ask in return is that the American ship just sails away for a few days, for humanitarian reasons, so I can feed my city.
And this is the bait, an absolutely explosive document. It's a letter, supposedly from Toussaint Louverture, straight to Napoleon Bonaparte, basically plotting a joint invasion of the United States. It even says Toussaint is promising 60,000 troops. For a young spy like McCoy, this is the discovery of a lifetime. But here's the masterstroke. In private, Pétion tells his captain the truth. The letter is a complete and total fake. It's a brilliant forgery. The whole thing is a trick to fool the Americans into lifting the blockade so he can get his supplies. He is perfectly willing to sacrifice McCoy's entire career to save his city. So McCoy, completely convinced he's uncovered this massive conspiracy, rushes the fake documents to the senior U.S. envoy, Dr. Edward Stevens. Now, Stevens is friends with Toussaint, so he's a little skeptical, but he agrees this is too big to ignore. He decides to go confront Toussaint himself. So just imagine the scene, right? Dr. Stevens walks into Toussaint's study and puts down this letter that basically accuses him of treason. The whole U.S. alliance, maybe the whole war, is hanging by a thread. And what does Toussaint do? He doesn't panic. He doesn't even deny it at first. He just bursts out laughing. And then he gives everyone a masterclass in power.
Toussaint's counterattack is all about the details. He starts by giving a little lesson on stationery.
He points out that the forgery, the fake letter, is written on common, everyday parchment. It's a tiny detail that a rookie like McCoy would have completely overlooked.
He then explains that all of his official state letters, the really important stuff, are always written on vellum. Think of it as the finest, highest quality paper you can get. It's not just about looking good. For Toussaint, it's a statement of his authority and his standards.
And with this one simple, elegant question, he brings the whole house of cards down. He basically asks, do you really think I, the leader of this colony, would send a letter to Napoleon, the leader of France, on cheap paper? And just like that, the lie is exposed. Pétion's brilliant ruse is completely undone, not by a counter-spy, but by a lesson in stationery.
Well, for poor Michael McCoy, his diplomatic career is over before it even starts. He gets sent home in disgrace. But the really amazing part is what happens next. This whole incident, instead of breaking the alliance between Toussaint and the U.S., actually ends up making it way stronger.
And let's be real about why. At this point, there were about 1,000 American ships doing business in Toussaint's ports. That is a massive amount of trade and money on the line. Pétion's failed gamble just made it crystal clear to the Americans who the real power player was and who they needed to keep on their side.
So yeah, far from breaking things up, this led to even deeper military cooperation. The U.S. actually placed its naval captains directly under Toussaint's command. Now, let that sink in for a second. You have white American Navy officers taking direct orders from a black general, a man born into slavery. This was completely unprecedented.
In the end, Pétion's forgery, his story, was clever, and it bought his starving city a few supplies. But Toussaint's command of the truth, his ability to tell a more powerful story about partnership, that won him a navy. It's a wild reminder that in the theater of war, where everyone's lying, sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't a sword at all, but just a more believable story.